The last time Chief O'Brien's old man was on board, he found him chasing Nurse Stanton around a biobed in sickbay. Captain Picard mistakes 47 wine for 46. Tisk tisk. And Worf has a beauty station. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 2, Family, written by Ronald D. Moore, the one and only, and directed by our pal, Les Landau. This is September 29th, 1990. Where were you? What's up, Sirach?
I'm good. How you doing?
Pretty good. September 29th. Shout out to my friend Stan the Man Balazer, whose birthday is September 29th, of Lithuanian descent. He is tall guy, plays volleyball a lot. I'm all right.
Shout out. Stan the Man. I have a friend named Stan the Man. That's usually
It's the rule.
That's the go-to nickname for
if you like
a friend
him.
named Stan. If you like him.
Yeah. Make a new plan, Stan. Or you can. It's another Stan thing. Paul Simon song. Anyway, so okay. I remember this episode. And what I remember most about this episode, oh, by the way, everybody check out this Prune Juice and Chill shirt, because anytime they mention Prune Juice and Worf, you got to wear this cool shirt. But I remember this episode when I was a kid, when I first saw it. What sticks out to me was two old guys playing in mud. Oh. And I remember thinking, this fight scene looks weak. This is not believable. What's going on? This is not a real fight. This is what's happening, and then at the end you see that they're laughing and giggling, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. They were play wrestling as brothers. Okay, but I remember that first impression as a kid. I was like, what the hell is going on here? They're not punching. They were they were doing the, and then eventually it gets revealed, but it actually hit me very differently this time around. But Sirach, you've never seen this episode. What did you think?
I thought kind of your same reaction from how you remember it, which is, oh, two old guys wrestling. That's kind of what jumped out at me. I felt the same. I thought it was weird. What the hell kind of unnecessary for me, the whole mud wrestling thing. I just thought not even necessary. It would have been like, maybe like a callback to Lucille Ball with the grapes. I think she had a wine grape episode where she was crushing grapes with her feet or something to that effect.
Iconic episode, yes.
A callback to that I would have been okay with, because they're on a wine, they've got a vineyard and they're talking about wine. So maybe a fight inside of that location, inside of one of those things where you stomp the grapes in, that may have been more appropriate, perhaps. I just didn't see the need for the mud. I felt like it just didn't seem, it was just bothered me, actually. It seemed inappropriate and just not necessary. I was like, even kids would know better than like, hey, yo, bro, seriously, it's muddy over here. You wouldn't roll around in it extra hard. You would, but they seem to be enjoying themselves a little too much. I will say, though, that the curmudgeon brother of Jean-Luc played a great curmudgeon brother. And I thought that was good performance by him. In certain moments, just, his face being all shriveled up and angry and bitter all the time. Him not really showing any affection. I think when Picard walks up, he doesn't even really turn his back fully or even extend his hand to shake his hand. No greeting of hello, just kind of like, yeah, what are you doing here? Type of, over the shoulder, cold shoulder moment. So I think the way he played it with his body language, with his performance, with his facial expressions, definitely was believable for me.
Mm-hmm. I have thoughts on him as well, Robert, but just to finish up on that mud wrestling tickle town, whatever was happening, I think they were tickling, they were throwing little mud. There was one point where the guy, after they lay down and they play like footsies or something, then Robert like throws a mud pie at Picard, and Picard goes, oh, gasp, or something like that. That actually made me laugh. But I'll tell you, like, that for some reason, when I first saw it, it just made me, I wouldn't quite say as strong as uncomfortable, but I was just kind of like, what's going on? It was just weird to me. But now, watching it this time and expecting it and knowing what to expect, I actually found it to be a beautiful moment, to be honest. Like after the wrestle, like when they were just lying there and Picard, tries to get his Emmy again, saying, no, I wasn't strong enough and I wasn't good enough and all that. And, that's obviously a really nice moment and really beautiful. And I really felt it. And we could talk more about that a little later, about afterwards when the wife walks in on them, which was funny. But yeah, so to the acting of Robert, I only noticed it at the very end of this episode. There was a moment, I don't remember where it was, but it was towards the end of the episode where I was just like, it was when Picard was drinking wine and Robert says, careful, you're not used to drinking the real thing. So it's maybe like 15 minutes left in the episode. It just hit me right then. I was like, holy crap, this guy's a really good actor. Never noticed it until right then. He almost has a Lord of the Rings feel. Like he'd be great in Lord of the Rings or something like that. And I also noticed towards the end in the mud pit, he seemed to slip into an Irish accent. I'm like, okay, so he's a French character with an English accent that slips into an Irish accent. I was getting very confused, but other than that, I was actually really impressed with his acting. Very good character actor seemed.
Yeah, he gave me some kind of like Michael Caine vibes.
Ooh, yeah.
I liked his performance in this. I kind of jumped on it from the beginning. I just had other issues with certain other things that I didn't really think matched up well for me. And mainly it was how disheveled he looked right from the beginning. Um, it felt like they were trying to portray him as beaten up and worn down or something to that effect, or yeah, beaten up by life or something, like he was on his knees and picking out uh roots or whatever he's doing, weed from the plants, or checking the bottom of the plants, and on his hands and knees. He's got dirt on his face and dirty hands, and kind of it gave me the impression like, here's a guy that's almost down on his luck and just like trying to hold on to make something out of this thing that's not really productive, and trying to make it productive. But then when you pull back from it, it's like it's this luscious, beautiful, like, you know, 400-acre. It's not like a guy like sitting there trying to turn the soil and make his Jack and the Beanstalk beans grow. It's he's actually got this huge, big, luscious farm, with this vineyard that's
Yeah.
gorgeous. And so here's what I think they were trying to do. You know, when Picard first mentions going back to home with the scene with Troy, and she's kind of talking to him like, "Where are you going to go?" And he's like, "Oh, I was thinking of going back to my home in what is it,
Le
Le
Bar,
Bar, Le Bar,
Eastern France,
yes,
tiny town, Eastern France, by
yeah,
Germany and Switzerland.
okay." So it's a tiny little town. Um, but what the thing about it being a tiny town, when I think of it, the way he referred to it was as my home village. Okay. So the language that Ronald Moore used by describing it as a village
Mm-hmm.
makes it seem like it's uh, of poor means. Like when you think of a village, you don't think of affluence. You more of, you know, regularness, like just, people who are doing not as well in life economically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for me, the term village, when he kept saying my home village, and that was also paired with the wardrobe choice of this kind of drab color that he was wearing, which made it look like almost like a homeless kind of outfit. The way it was not, there was no detail, there was no ornamentation to the outfit itself. It looked very, the colors were drab, the fit was not exactly custom fitted. It's kind of one of those outfits that they have somebody wearing in the usual Star Trek shot when they cut to the center of the village and everybody's playing hacky sack and stuff.
Yeah.
So those combination of things kind of give it the air of this guy lives in a poor little village in a small little hut somewhere, off the, like just like this really meager and humble beginnings. And then you get there and it's got, this grandiose kind of Victorian place with a sprawl of a vineyard and,
Hired help.
fireplaces, hired help. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not a village per se, the way
His
it was
home
described.
is a village. his entire
Yes.
his
Yes.
home is the entire village, basically.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about. So when I'm like, this doesn't match up. Like he's walking down a road, and I'm thinking, oh, this is the road of the village. No, this is your own property.
It's his
You're on.
driveway.
It's your driveway. Exactly. So you know exactly who that kid is hiding in the bush. It's not like you're like surprised by one of these villagers.
That's funny.
So
Well,
yeah.
let me explain something to you, Sirach. As a Frenchman myself, all Frenchmen own a vineyard. That's just how it
Oh,
works. Every
oh well,
French
then that's
person, when you turn
yeah,
12, the government gives you your very own vineyard.
right.
Sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's only like 40 acres, But,
Oh.
so all French people, they get their free vineyard when they turn 12
Hmm.
and a
Right.
quilt. It's just a thing they
Right.
do, and your first pack of cigarettes. When you're 6, you get your first bottle of wine. It's just the French thing. When you're
Yeah.
2, you actually get your first horizontally striped shirt and little sailor hat. So it's kind of
When do you get the cottage in the castle?
you have to build that yourself while drinking your first bottle of wine. It's this they have rituals. It's a
It's a rite
cultural
of
thing.
passage.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing. And then you lose to a war when you're 14. It's just kind of a thing that the French do. They lose wars. But anyway,
Can
but I
I
will
also offer? Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, please.
I was just gonna say I will say, like, seeing that part, even though I know it wasn't shot in France, they did a good job
Yeah.
of finding something that looked French. And it did make me homesick for, the places that I've visited and the family that I visit and have been in France, mostly in the south of France, although this, I believe, is in the east. But it just made me feel like, I miss that. And I did look up where it was shot. And the home itself is in Encino, so not too crazy, very local. And the vineyard itself is in Lancaster. So people know that as like the high desert. It's, about an hour or 45 minutes north of LA. But anyway, so that's where it was shot.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious about that. But what were you going to say?
No, I was curious about that too. Actually, I was wondering whose home they used. I thought maybe one of the producers, if that was maybe Magel's home or Rick Berman's home. I
Might
wondered
have been
about
Michael
that too.
Jackson. He lived in Encino.
It might have been. I don't know. But I did wonder about the house. But I was also going to say that without the reference that Troy had in the conversation with Picard about the Borg and what they, having to deal with the emotional impact of recovering from that experience. Without that conversation, I almost forgot what just happened, right? Like because the episode almost didn't give me enough of coming out of that to deal with. You know what I mean? I wanted to see more of Picard talking about that particular issue. Not so much as the climax and the end of this episode, but more like almost towards the beginning of the episode. First of all, it would have been nice to see him having to remove the bandages that we saw him have on the last episode. So, kind of a bandage removal moment, right? With Dr. Crusher, she's like, well, today's the day. It's okay, and you should be 100% healed. That kind of conversation would have been great. Him looking in the mirror, kind of remembering the moment, saying, seeing himself back to himself again, feeling, trying to own his spirit back. That would have been a great intro for me leading up into this kind of getaway that they were trying to show me.
Yeah. Also, there are a few things there. One was I was realizing that this is kind of the first serialized part of Star Trek. The original series was not serialized. They have shot it in all kinds of crazy sequences, in fact. But the Next Generation never even had a two-parter until now. The first episode was an hour and a half, but it was not released as a two-parter. It was an hour and a half pilot, which is what a lot of shows did back then, right? The pilot movie, the premiere movie or whatever, and then it goes episodic. But this was the first time they had a two-parter, and this is almost kind of like the third. I mean, it's clearly serialized. This isn't like episode 11 of season 4. This is like the direct result of what happened with the Borg in the last two episodes. It's reminiscent of how Deep Space Nine in the fall of 93. Remember the season 2? You guys had like a 3-part thing about like the Bajoran terrorists or something like that at the beginning of season 2, episode 1, 2, and 3. It was kind of similar to that. Now, what Next Generation started off kind of here, obviously we know Deep Space Nine mastered with the serialization and all that, but it was interesting to see that this is the first kind of 3-episode arc. But also, when you mentioned Troy, it's kind of weird that Troy kissed Picard, right? Do therapists usually do that? Like they go like, hey, so, I've had a little bit of improvement with my relationship with my father and this and that. Oh, looks like that's all the time we have. All right. Is that what they do? I don't know.
I mean, you got to pay extra, but if you get that package. No, I don't know. That was interesting to me. She said something else that kind of influenced her relationship with Riker as well. She said, "Oh, Will and I are thinking about going back to Angel Falls." She's like, "Oh yeah, Will and I are thinking about going back to," and Angel Falls sounds like a place that Will and her had a good time before. So
it's gigantic. It's this gigantic waterfall. But yeah, it does sound like that. Maybe they got lost in there, and who knows what might happen.
Yeah, so she kind of threw it out there that they were going to team up and have a little couples retreat moment. So there was a lot of stuff going on in this episode. But this is also the episode. So this is one thing that I wanted to jump out and say too. I've heard you talk about Worf's parents now for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard you mention the Rozhenkos, and that Worf comes from these Russian parents.
Mm-hmm.
this is the first time I got to see them, and so there was, oh, that's this episode type of thing for me. That's what registered for me. It was like, oh, this is the we see Worf's parents episode.
Yeah, and I don't remember how many times we see them, not a ton through the series, maybe one or two more times. But this is the one that, we remember well. And it was really cute. I thought it was really cool that his dad was a chief petty officer and he goes up to Chief O'Brien and he's talking
Yeah,
with him like old buddies. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with those two. Um, Also, I thought it was really cute that Jordy called him chief, even though he's
yeah.
retired. Like, I don't know, respecting older people that have been there and done that usually means a lot to them, and it's so easy for us to do. So just do it. Just treat them well, give them their respect, say nice things to them, treat them right, because it's like, I don't know, I have a soft spot for people that get older, they have a tougher time with things. Maybe they've served in the military and they have injuries or traumas or things like that. Whatever it is, like, you know, they're used to being respected, they're used to being big and strong, they're used to being this, and then it goes away, and it's really hard for them, And I know Sirach, you two are, pretty good about that, but it's just always nice to see older people getting respected and getting treated well, because they're a lot more vulnerable. But anyway, I just like that. Just that small thing. Jordy calling him chief. He didn't have to do that. He could have just called him Sergey, but I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice touch as well. To me, that rings more true in the military culture of respect, and so I felt like, oh, this is accurate because this is um, maybe giving proper respect to older people is not what we do in the regular world, but in the world of the military, it's usually something that's done frequently. You honor somebody's service, you honor that they're retired and elder, and they've put in their work. So um, I thought it was also nice that Jordy walked around and he was kind of giving the tour. And he's like, it's 10 times more powerful than the other ship that you was on, and kind of like running him down through the specs. And I like that Mr. Rozhenko was also into ships, right? So he
Mm-hmm.
was like, he kept saying, I have the manual, I have this, I know the specs, I've done my homework on this stuff, and it just means that he has a passion for it, and I thought that was another thing that rang true for me. I liked it.
Another moment that the actor did that I really liked. Let's see if I can find his name. His name is Theodore Bickel. Um, one thing that he did was at the end, like what you mentioned, when he was saying, "Oh, I still have the specs at home." He did the perfect job of, you see this thing closing, right? The doors closing, and him like staying in it until the very last second. That's a pro actor. He knows you're not looking at the person you're talking to. He's watching the camera, and he's watching when these doors close and the camera gets out of sight, he needs to follow it until that very last second. And he did it perfectly. I'm like, it's
Yeah,
it's again a small minor thing, but it shows experience. It shows that this guy knows what he's doing. He's a pro, and I was just like, oh, good job, dude.
yeah, good job. I felt like though the drama that was being written for his character and for the parents with Worf, it didn't resonate with me as being valid enough to warrant the response it was getting. It felt like, I don't know, it wasn't believable for me. I wasn't buying that they're so concerned for Worf because of him being dishonored or
Yeah,
disaccommodation. It just didn't ring for me.
and therein lies the problem with having three plots. You can't quite oftentimes sink your teeth into each one as much as you would like. So you have to kind of brush over it or gloss over it and, hope that it works out. For the record, I think this is a great episode, very well written, but, there's some things that you feel like they could have added a little more oomph to it. But we'll talk about that on the other side of our break, as well as a really cool fan film connection here. Star Trek fan films were all the rage a few years back before new Star Trek came out. So we'll see what's up with that in a moment. On the other side, we'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach, the final boss, Lofton.
Hello.
Here are the trivioids of the week, everybody. We got a bunch of them. The Enterprise is undergoing a major overhaul and refit at McKinley Station. Worf has informed his parents of his discommendation. Captain Picard goes to La Barre, France for the first time in almost 20 years. Worf's mother is never on time. The last time Chief O'Brien's old man was on board, he found him chasing Nurse Stanton around the bio bed in sickbay. Captain Picard doesn't look so arrogant to Renee. Robert must cure this poor, sick vine. Deanna Troi is thinking of going back to Angel Falls. Sergei Rozhenko used to be a warp specialist on the old Excelsior class. The mayor of La Barre wants to give Captain Picard a parade. I wonder if they call him a parade. You should call it a parade. Picard mistakes 47 wine for 46. And Worf has a beauty station. Did you notice that? Like, I had to rewind and be like, did I see that right? Is Worf? I mean, he was fixing his hair. Okay, that's fine. And playing with whatever he was doing. Cool. But then he gets up from what appears to be just this little throne that he sits in with a little mirror and that he can just, kind of play. What was it? Did you notice that? He just had a little hair beauty station by the door.
It is a warrior station.
I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I saw that. Actually, now that you mention it, I did see him kind of doing his getting ready for Hollywood moment there, where he had a little. All he needed was one of those powder brushes where he was just powdering himself. Because he had his hair kind of looking at his hair. It was funny to watch, and he had some funny moments in this one. Sometimes. Yeah. He overplays the comedy to me a little bit sometimes. And this might have been one of those. I think it's even funnier if he's more awkward than. Because there were some funny facial expressions where he was trying to do a lot, in some of these moments there. But I don't know. It's also I feel like the parents. I would have taken that part out of this episode. Actually,
yeah,
it didn't need to be there.
Or it could have been in a different episode where it got a lot more added to it, and you're right, more of an urgency than, hey, we heard you were discommendated from the Klingon Empire. I don't know if that's worthy of an entire visit, but I understand why it was put in there because the episode's called Family. It's supposed to be, but it could have been called Family and literally just been about Picard's adventures, back down in France. It could have been the entire thing, but they like to do that. They like to have those things.
Even if they visited Worf, the Rozhenkos, I would have liked a different reason. The reason they gave was the disaccommodation that he got from the Klingon Empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that as enough of a reason. If there was something else where, for example, the father comes to meet him and he's like, you know what, your mother and I are splitting up, we're getting a divorce. It's like, after 50 years, what are you talking about? And Worf has to play putting them back together type Worf. I would have liked that better.
Mm-hmm.
The concern for him didn't seem enough of a driving force for their storyline. If it was something that they were going through a conflict, your mother and I are going to split up, I'm going to stay with you here on the station. Like, whoa, 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 what do you mean you stay with me on the station? I don't want you to stay with me, you know?
Or why does it even need to be a thing? What if, hey, they're floating outside of Earth right now? What if his parents just show up and they're like, hey, we heard you're in town. We wanted to come by and see our son because we never get a chance or something like that.
yes. Yeah.
And then that feels very natural and organic. And then it's just kind of like Worf going like, oh boy, here, and then they just kind of come
And
around and
then he
become pals.
slips and talks about, then they slip and say, hey, are you here because of his discommodation? And they're like, what? What do you mean discommodation?
Yeah.
You never told us about that.
Yeah. He's like,
And
oh, well, are you here about the brother that I met? What? You have a brother? We didn't know about that.
yes, exactly. That would have been better. It would have been better. Like if
That's
they just
funny.
popped in on Worf and were finding out all these things about him that they didn't know. You like
Hmm.
prune juice? You have a brother? You got kicked out of the Klingon Empire. Like, how come you're not telling any of this? Warp, we write you all the time. You don't respond. Something to that effect would have been better than we were so worried about you that we waited 6 months after you told us till you finally showed up around our neighborhood. And then it just, and then we didn't approach you directly with it. We snooped around and talked to all of the friends on the Enterprise we don't know and
Yeah.
told them about it. Like it just didn't really. I didn't
So let
buy
me
it.
tell you this. So the third part was kind of a nice moment with the Crushers, right?
Yeah,
That was very
yeah,
cool. And that could have easily just been a B plot, but instead it was like a C plot.
yeah.
So here's something interesting about that. To my knowledge, I believe that is the only time we ever see Jack Crusher, Wesley's father, Beverly Crusher's husband.
Yeah.
Well, back in the day, back during the Star Trek fan film craze, there was a group that was going to do a fan film about like the Crushers before Jack Crusher died, and they cast me to play Jack Crusher, the lead of the. It was going
Oh
to be
yeah.
basically the Jack Crusher fan film, and I was going to play Jack Crusher with like a little 6-year-old Wesley or 5-year-old or something like that, and a friend of mine, Genevieve, with red hair, who was perfect for Beverly Crusher, and a couple other things, a couple other fun things. Too bad that one never fully materialized, but I always remember like that would have been a fun one, just to kind of see a prequel of the Crusher family and how things went, giving them a little bit more backstory and stuff. That was a fun thing to look at. Cool script. But anyway, would have been fun to play Jack Crusher because you don't know much about him, and we don't know much about Beverly Crusher beforehand. But it's like they deserve a little bit more than what they get in the next generation.
Yeah. First thing is, I like the idea of leaving somebody some type of hologram type of message like this. It
Totally.
seems like something that's practical and might actually be applicable. But nowadays, it might just be going through your social media and having that be the thing you left behind, right? Like all of the pics and posts. But I thought originally that this was going to be, I wrote down, oh, Nam, Jack Crusher. And I'm like, not a Nam.
Me too. I did that and I was like, I wrote it down and I was like, wait a second. I think this is the episode where we see him. I don't think it's going to be in them. But yeah, me too. I did the same thing.
And then I wrote, then Worf says, tell Guinan I'll be, if
Yep.
you're looking for me, tell Guinan to call me or something. And then I'm like, Nam Guinan, because I didn't see her, right? And then here she comes, she pops up right after that. So I actually wrote Nam twice in my thing and had to cross it out 2 different times.
I did it 3 times because it was also when at the beginning when Beverly also mentions Wes. I was like, okay, Nam for Jack Crusher. Oh, Nam for Wes too. And I was like, wait a second. Maybe not. And then, Nam for
Maybe.
Crusher for Guinan. Nope. So that was, I don't think there were any non-appearance mentions in this entire
Yeah,
episode.
I don't think so either, but I certainly got fooled a few times.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there was some moments there that I liked. I did like that we did get to see Jack Crusher, and it's funny because that becomes such a reoccurring theme having talking about him. You know, he's very talked about for a person that
The
is
most.
rarely seen, only one time seen. So, and then having the other son of Beverly named Jack Crusher as well is just like keeps the name in rotation, right?
Played by everybody's buddy, Ed Spaliers.
Ed Spaliers, yeah, great guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I want to also say that I did like the very closing end scene of the lines. There was a moment there, and it was like sometimes they end on some the corny note. Remember we were talking about that kind of corny. Oh, let's make a joke note, and it's like, come on, we just went to survive Wolf 357,
Right.
and now you're making a corny like joke, and it's not the way
Especially
to end.
original series loves to do that.
Yeah, don't end the tone when the whole time was serious, and then now at the very last second put a corny joke at the end. And for me, the opposite of that is putting something great at the end, something that kind of leaves you with some great kind of lasting, last taste in your mouth. And I think the best of that is in the pale moonlight with Cisco when he kind of does the glass scene. And I think that's an example of the best of that, where you leave somebody with some good words, final words, parting words, something, words to think about. And in this episode, those words were when this, the brother of Picard and his wife were kind of sitting in their place, and the camera was peering in through the window, and she says something to the effect of, he's still out there dreaming about starships and adventures. And then the brother Robert says, yeah, but let him dream. And it kind of left it on that kind of a moment of, and to me that's a great moment to me of uplifting the legacy and legendary kind of past of somebody like Picard. It's he is the guy out there dreaming about starships, exploring, and for looking for adventures, dreaming. So I think that's a great way to end it, because it's a good description of what the writers want Picard to be known for and as.
Yeah, and Star Trek has a lot of moments where a lot of great moments of people looking out the window into stars. As you know, like the last shot of Deep Space Nine, that's an amazing one. Even when Guinan comes up to Sergei and Helena Rozhenko, and she just says, people are looking out at the stars. And then she also said that a really nice thing, which was Worf's not looking at the Klingon homeworld. He's looking towards you guys, which I was like, wow, that's a really nice. It's kind of a layered thing, It's really nice. I had forgotten about that. It's a good one, but also a couple things. Back to Robert and Picard, or Jean-Luc, I should say. When Robert, what was it? Oh, when Robert and Picard are like drunk sitting together afterwards, they're like, "Oh, he fell, and then we both fell together," and they're like, I don't know why, but that made me laugh. That was just a really good moment. And another thing that strangely got me was when they kissed each other on the cheek, because that's a very French thing. Dudes do it. They kiss each other on the cheek, sometimes 4 times, sometimes 2. In this case, just the one, I think, or maybe they did it twice. No, they did it twice, which is pretty standard. Usually, anyway, they do it about 4 times when it's like, haven't seen you in years. Twice is the standard thing. But it was nice. It made me feel at home. I was like, oh, that's so cute. And also, 2 old British actors that weren't even doing like the kind of faking it. They fully like left moisture on each other's cheeks. I was like, boy, they are really committing to this. I was like, that's even more than we do. We just kind of like fake it. French people just kind of go, they don't actually like moisten. They don't actually moisten each other's cheeks. You know what I mean?
It's like an air kiss. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? It's like a mm,
It's cheek to
okay,
cheek. It's not lip to cheek, you know?
okay, okay.
So calm
Well,
down.
even brothers. No, I'm joking. Yeah, no, I was okay with that. Their chemistry was believable. Actually, I
Totally.
did
Yeah.
believe that the chemistry between the two of them. I believe that he was the older brother because he did have that older brother. I get to say what I want to say type of air to him, and Picard had that frustrated younger brother where it's like, "Damn it, you get away with that. You're the only person that can say that to me." And there's moments like that, so I loved that. It was believable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he also had some good other lines that where I thought were good, which Ronald Moore was kind of giving us these telling us about how different Picard was from his brother by using technology as the thing, right? That
Yeah.
separated them. Picard is into technology and his brother is into the old world, old style of doing things, and this conflict between uh, conservatism and progressiveness essentially is what Ronald Moore was using as the main separator between
Mm-hmm.
Picard and Robert, right? Like
Right.
you're this dreamer guy who's into technology, and me, I'm the one who's holding together the past and the principles that our father handed to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Picard, rightfully so, was saying, "Hey, I'm not giving up on my principles because I also pursue technology and enjoy adventures on a starship. I still stay true to certain principles that our parents taught us, so I do conserve those things. It's just not done in the same exact fashion in this Amish way that you're conserving everything, right? And you're holding on to their values. So I thought that was a good argument to make as a writer to have this polarity there. It creates drama. It's good for friction between siblings, and I thought that was also believable. And
Mm-hmm.
them making up after they fought was also believable. That's also another thing that you would see commonly in the family structure. Two guys, two brothers, fight it out, and then and then they're best friends again.
Yeah. Totally agree. It's just about time for the home run of the day. I almost dropped the ball a minute ago. But it also reminded me of it's funny because I actually called my brother today and we caught up a bit. He lives out in New York. But there are a lot of similarities with these guys. Like I noticed Robert was taller than Picard. My brother's 4 inches taller than I am. He's 6'4". So I hate him for that. And I don't hate you. It's okay that you're 6'4". But he was older. He was also like valedictorian and straight A student and varsity on all the sports. And I was like the little shit that got away with everything, got into trouble and whatever. So the very different, types of
Yeah,
personalities, but it was fun to see these two guys squabble, and we would fight every day. Guess who would
yeah.
lose? The younger, shorter one every time. Anyway, home run of the day, Sirach Lofton. And who gets that?
Home run of this episode. Mm, I will give it to Robert, the brother, Picard's brother, was was great for the guest starring role. Believable. It's hard to challenge somebody like Picard, who has this bravado about him. And it seemed like his brother was out arrogancing the arrogant one, and so I like that about his performance. So I will give it to the guest actor who played. Is it Robert Picard?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, my brother also can out arrogant the arrogant one. Um, but I completely agree. Robert gets the home run of the day, and it took me long enough to realize it. It took me like 30 or 35 minutes before I was like, hang on a second. This guy's a good
Yeah.
actor. I was a little slow on the uptake there, but totally agree. Great job. He was awesome. Let's give a special thanks to some of our pals that are also awesome, or who are also awesome. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom T.J. Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Muller, Dr. Muhammad Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, and Dr. Stephanie Baker. Congratulations to them. Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Life from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manisfee, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, Luther Haynes, and of course, Jason Oken and Greg K. Wickstrom. All right, everybody, stick around. We'll be right back. We've got the free-for-all up next on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton. This is the free-for-all. Finally, it's here with Melissa Longo.
Hello, hello, hello.
Jason M. Oken. Greg Kenzo out in Hawaii. Don't let that vineyard fool you. Allison Leach Hyde in her childhood home. Eve England is out in Wales. TJ Jackson Bay is out in Missouri. Mai is live in Tokyo. Wow, all these extravagant places to live. Faith Howell is on the Enterprise D Bridge. Jake Barrett is here finally, and we're happy about it. Carrie Schwent is hanging out in a vehicle. The Dark Lord Chris McGee's got his family shirt. That's really cool. And the Matt Boardman is deciding between the Rio and Gold Coast. All right. Here we go. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I will say this is about a 7.2.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know what it is on IMDb?
I reckon it's either high or
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think this one would have some people would love it and some people wouldn't like it. So I think it might be a bit of a low score.
Go up a full point and go 8.2. I don't think I'm going to make the trifecta though.
All right, that's
8.1.
7.1.
No, 8.1 for me.
Got it.
Yeah.
8.1. Yeah. All right. It's an 8.3, everybody.
No way.
8.3 on IMDb. And I get it now. All right. Do you guys catch any non-appearance mentions? Because Sirach and I got fooled by those a few times. We thought there was going to be one. Nope. Okay. What about some kind of or some sorts of Dark Lord?
There was one. Is my volume okay, by the way?
Could go up a tiny bit.
Yeah, I can go up.
All right. Let's go to about here then. Perfect. Good. Thank you. So, yes, there was one. Sergei was entertaining Geordi with a story about Worf's childhood. He said, so we walked into the school. We didn't know what to expect. Is Worf hurt? Is he in some kind of trouble?
Excellent. Excellent.
7 bloody noses.
All right. Melissa Longo, please get us started off on the right track by telling us what this episode meant to you. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What do you think?
I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a beautiful episode and a necessary episode. I felt like it was planting the seeds of what DS9 did so well, and that was to highlight family. And then, not to hit the nail on the head, but with the title, but it highlighted family so well, and it gave us some backstory to characters that we needed before. We hadn't really gotten up until this point, except for with Data during the Offspring. So it was an exploration of family, and I think it was needed for Picard. And I love that they didn't gloss over the trauma that he had experienced with the Borg. And I totally understand why he chose to go back home to his hometown to try and recover, because in a way, even though his brother is really hard on him, he's kind of his touchstone as well in grounding him and bringing him back and bringing him back to a familiarity when he's just experienced such chaos and destruction in universe. So I really enjoyed this. I love Worf's parents. How sweet are they? They're so sweet. I wanted to just hug them. But I'll leave it with this. The most impactful moment for me in the episode, and there was quite a few, was when right after Robert and Jean-Luc were wrestling in the mud, and they start laughing, but then Picard has a breakdown. And I think it's the most human that we've ever seen him, and the most vulnerable moment that we've ever seen him. And it brought tears to my eyes because I really felt for this guy who was going through so much turmoil. And it was his breaking point, and he was in a safe place where he could have that breaking point. So this is why I loved this episode so much. And Ronald D. Moore has become one of my favorite writers. I love him. And I love the influence that Michael Piller has brought to the show. I love that too, because we now get family. It's great.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Melissa Longo. I hope that in Things Left Unsaid, we're going to touch upon Worf's beauty station behind you. That is
yes.
very important to me.
Yes.
Jason M. Oken is here. He actually has 2 beauty stations. What do you think of this episode?
What makes you think I have only 2? It takes a village to make this happen. A face fit for radio is
awesome. Perfect.
Now, this is a wonderful episode. Has always been one of my favorites. And Melissa, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, certainly it's titled Family, but I think, as we will see as we go through seasons 4, I think it's just literally an overarching theme for the entire season. And, we're just going to see family. And this perhaps is the most on Star Trek episode, or at least on Next Generation episode we'll see, and the most Deep Space Nine-like episode I think we'll see of the Next Generation. There's no, in reality, it's not. There's no real science fiction elements in this episode at all. No real technobabble. It's pretty straightforward, which opens the palette a little bit, and certainly going in location opens things up quite a bit as well. I mean, we see that establishing shot of Picard walking down. You can't do that on a soundstage at all. Even the courtyard of their house was bigger than the central square in Ensigns of Command. I mean, you just see the scope and the scale, and you have the guest stars who feel more comfortable. I mean, I don't know if Jeremy Camp could spit out technobabble. I strongly doubt it. He probably wouldn't have taken the role anyway for something like that. But it was just wonderful to see that. I think the acting was wonderful. The directing was very nice. It was an enjoyable. It was a wonderful emotional episode. It's something that highlights the fact that Star Trek can have all kinds of different shows. It can be funny. It can be dramatic. It can be straight down science fiction. It can be anything. And we get to enjoy all of it, and it fits within the parameters. I mean, granted, there was controversy when this first came up because of how unlike everything else it was. The idea was to have jeopardies, to have some sort of science fiction concept, but I think this demonstrates you don't really need that. And I think it certainly got extended in Deep Space Nine, where you actually have more of a focus on people, on character, than maybe on the trappings of science fiction. Sometimes you can step away from that. I mean, obviously, this is a science fiction action adventure show. You can't have every episode like that. but certainly, what comes after the best of both worlds, this, fits thematically very well. There's, a hell of a lot more to say, and I'll save that for later.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Jason M. Oken. A far cry from season 1 when you were saying, this episode sucks, this episode sucks, we're getting into the meat now. Thank you very much. Greg Kenzo is out in Hawaii. We're all jealous. What do you think of this one?
Like Jason and Melissa just said, it's one of my favorite episodes. I don't know if they said that exactly, but it is one of my favorite episodes of TNG. I think it's done so well, and I don't know if it's because it's the contrast between space. Like we still get that contrast with the ship at docking station McKinley. I think it is. It doesn't really matter. The greenery of Picard's vineyard is it's so beautiful. That's what paradise looks like to me. I guess growing up in Hawaii, like something else looks like paradise, and that's what I just see that as paradise. Anyway, the episode, it's great. I mean, I'll start with the monologue of Guinan. Guinan's monologue was so profound and heartwarming towards the Rodchenkos. I know this is mostly about Picard's almost like origin, but she has Whoopi has a great monologue in there. Let's see, Wesley has a really great interaction with his father Jack at the end of the show, and I think that's a really good just way to end it. But it also got me thinking about the dangers of holo addiction, in this universe. Like if you could create, like Geordi creates a recreation of I forget her name, but you know who I'm talking about. If you could do that with a loved one, like would you ever leave the holodeck? Or at least you would spend a lot of time in there, with someone that's passed away, someone that you love. But yeah, like Melissa said, almost word for word, this is the most vulnerable we see Picard, and I think that's what makes us it kind of takes the chip off his shoulder, and it's so different from season 1 Picard, like the shut up Wesley, and of like the one-dimensional aspects of Picard. He was just like this one person. This is so much more, and I'm so happy that we have this episode too. I think this is what gave us the movies. It's definitely what gave us Picard the series. I mean, there's so many mirrors. Like I think it's Renee that you see at the end, the little kid looking out at the stars. That's like Picard in season 1 of Picard, the new show. Or they touch on it anyway. Long story short, this is a great episode. But the philosophy of the episode, I'll end with this, is I think living with trauma, and it comes out when Robert says you can live below the sea with Lewis or above the clouds with the Enterprise, but you're still in. And if I had to end that sentence, it would be, but you'll still be living with that trauma. So,
yeah, very good. Thank you very much, Greg K. Wickstrom, out in Hawaii. All right, Allison Leachhide is here, sitting on a bed in her old home, which is fitting for this episode. What do you think of this one?
Yes, I went to great lengths to come to 2 days of driving to be in my childhood home. No, it was just coincidence, but it made me feel really different about this episode, because I'm like, oh, I'm actually watching this episode in my childhood home, which I only come to once a year because I live many states away from my dad and my stepmom and my brother. And so I only come here once a year. I'm like, oh yeah, I am a different me when I'm here. And I could see why Picard would really need to go, I need a me that isn't Starfleet. Like, what was I before I was ever in a position where this could have happened? And yeah, he and his brother are brothers and had some things to work through. And it's wonderful that they got to, and we got to see that. And that Robert's wife was like, I'm going to reach out to this man whom my husband doesn't talk to, but is my family, and make him a part of my family because he is. I really love that they wrote that in. I agree the Rozhenkos are the best parents on like in the galaxy. Like they're amazing. Just how much they love Worf. And I also love how Worf loves his parents. When he puts that smile on his face after talking to O'Brien when they're transporting in of, I'm going to be embarrassed, but I love my parents and I am happy to see them. And he puts that smile on his face and goes, I'm going to make this the best I can. Let's do this. And I think my two favorite parts of this episode probably happened with the Rozhenkos. The scene with Guinan makes me cry whenever she says, he's looking back to you. I'm like, oh God. Mm-hmm. But Sergei, getting Worf and his wife to go off and do their own tour, and then looks at Geordi and says, I need you to tell me about my son. I'm like, oh, best parents ever. So I'm so happy Michael Piller fought for this episode to be this episode the way it is, and not putting the sci-fi episode aspects into it, because what us as an audience needed the healing too from what we just went through. And of course, Picard needs it because he was horrifically violated, and giving him the time to become not fixed, but a little better made it okay for all of us to know that it takes time to be better. So I love this episode.
Very good stuff. Thank you very much, Allison Leachhide. Excellent perspective. We go all the way to Wales for Eve England out in Wales. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, totally echo what everyone said. It was a really good watch. It was sort of a nice, refreshing episode after the last two. I mean, I obviously learned that, in the future, somehow England have taken over France because everybody seemed to have an English accent apart from when they referred to their names, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I just really liked how this was just a character episode rather than any specific plot, that we're used to. So that was really nice for all the reasons that everyone's just said. So I won't reiterate those. I mean, it's interesting. I think now looking at it in the context of, having watched Deep Space Nine and I suppose TV that we're used to, I think, although I love the fact that we had the three family sort of connections, I think what I really was craving though here, and I think what would have made it an even better episode, and then maybe had sort of this more light-hearted family episode, maybe a separate episode, is I just felt that I wanted to have more of Picard dealing with the trauma. It kind of just felt a bit rushed to me, and the fight at the end, it was quite cute, but it felt a little bit too cliche looking at it from today's lens of how we might see TV shows. So I did really enjoy it, and taking it from its time, I think it was a brilliant episode. But I think if this was being done now, I just think they could have just done so. And I don't know obviously whether they deal with this again, but it was that one speech we had from Picard when they finished that fight. I just thought that it just felt a bit rushed, and I just thought, oh my God, that is so profound and that's so important, and we just don't see this, and knowing what happens in Deep Space Nine with the Sisko family, I just thought, oh, it could have just been so much more powerful. They could have used all that and just extended it. So loved it, but yeah, that was just I came away thinking I wanted a bit more of Picard and seeing that human side to him.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Eve England out in Wales. Speaking of accents, one thing I noticed when they were all sitting at the dinner table, the kid had the best French accent when they said salut. He was the only one that said it. I was like, that little British kid just say it perfectly. Good for him. He really did. One word, though. Mai is live in Tokyo, who has a perfect Japanese accent when she speaks Japanese, I bet. What do you think of this one? Oh, can't hear you.
Get my mic going here. Yeah, exactly. I said, hi, Sonotori. Anyway, I like the way they use this frame story style, which has been used for thousands of years. We saw it a lot in How I Met Your Mother, with stories within stories within stories, framing it. I thought it was cool. There were three stories here with the parents and child issues related to children accepting the parents for who they are, sibling rivalry, criticism, relationship deterioration, but family being family in the end. And then parental helicoptering, disallowing growth and inspiration. I thought of the 3 stories, the first was done very well, and I thought the Picard and Crusher stories lacked a lot in the telling, to be honest. With Worf and his parents, the acceptance of his parents is something kids usually go through when they become parents, or when they've completed the process of evaluating all the values that they've been given as kids, keeping many, replacing some with others of their own creation, and finding peace with that. Worf is all kinds of slow in this respect, but he gets there in the end. I thought the Klingon aspect was similar to the handicap that parents from the 50s had before they learned it was okay to communicate about feelings. That was kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, as everybody said, Guinan's reassurance of Worf's parents is awesome. Picard and his brother, before leaving, I really liked Deanna's compassion and comforting of Picard. I felt that was just, she was almost like a big sister to a younger brother, or a little sister to a big brother, but there was a really cool sort of sibling relationship the way she spoke to him. It wasn't at all overly sweet like it can be sometimes. But I chuckled at the technology versus tradition conversation about what's gained and what's lost. We have that a lot today with kids not learning how to write cursive or read a book because they just have screens. But ultimately, the root of brotherly discord is found in Picard was the golden child, and his brother hated that. And Picard seemed oblivious to it, which is what caused the arrogance feeling, I think, on the part of Robert. But then this is where it all falls apart, because the Borg kidnapping is positioned as his comeuppance of sorts. And after a bunch of disjointed scenes, Robert forces Picard to talk about the kidnapping, and then his brother's advice to learn to live with it, rather than addressing the feelings created by this loss of freedom, is just, that's ignorant. It's very 1970s style thinking. I did love the hug at the end. I thought that this was the best part of the storyline. His almost crying voice, that was good, but I think the hug at the end really sold that one for me at the end. But much more on that whole scene there in the, and I'm using the inverted quotes here, vineyards. Beverly, Jack, and Wesley, and I qualified as all 3 because it was all 3 of them really. It was so short. It was such a small part, but Beverly's own fears and sadness projected onto Wesley. It's not fair to him. She was overly protective. She taught him to learn to deal with the loss and just stop there, rather than telling him to learn of the good in him provided by his father. I thought the holo message from his dad was really good. But much more to say and things left unsaid. I'll stop there.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. My Live in Tokyo. TJ Jackson Bay is far from Tokyo, out in Missouri. What do you think of this one?
Oh, I very much enjoyed revisiting this episode. It's obviously always stood out to me because it's so different from, the rest of the episodes we see. And it's one of the only ones, and especially in the Next Generation and the more episodic, storytelling, that we get to see them actually deal with the stuff that they went through. And not even just in the previous episode, Worf's discommendation, that happened, earlier in the season, and, he's still kind of dealing with it. So that stays with him. And we get to see that. We get to see it acknowledged on screen. So, I really appreciated that. I mentioned the conversation that Troy and Picard, had before he went down to the planet, and she does her famous, what do you think? And she even doubles up on it and said, is that what you believe? And I love Picard's response to it because, it kind of says, well, I hate when you do that. Yeah, he says, but like Maya was talking about, just really, again, made that a really human conversation, versus a superior and a, subordinate talking to each other, or even, just a counselor and patient, which Picard would probably never want to admit he is, but, he talks to her, and that's important. I enjoyed when the Rozhenkos, come on board, just how excited his father is to be on the ship. And he's probably doing, what we all would do. If I ever got on the Enterprise, I'd be yelling, "Oh, I have the technical manual at home," written by the Okudas. And I'd be like,
totally
trying to quote that. He's so excited. He even says it again. He says it 3 or 4 times. I think I know he says it to Picard at the end. I have all the specs and diagrams at home. And again, a lot's been said about that relationship that Worf has with them, and I thought it was portrayed very beautifully. Seeing Worf's journey, and Guinan telling them they're the best parents in the universe. And they describe, how they kind of dealt with that, and you can kind of see it in Worf as well, that they let him explore his Klingon heritage on his own, and they helped him a little bit. They made the blood pie, and tried to give him, Klingon dishes and the Klingon experience as best they could, but they let him be Klingon, and they gave him, human love as parents. And so, that makes me think that, maybe Worf feels like, okay, this Klingon thing, that's my thing, and my parents are over here. And he doesn't see them together until this moment, when they, tell him, okay, we let you do your Klingon thing, but this dishonor deal is bigger than that. And we need to love you through that. We're with you. We know who you are, and dishonor is not who you are. They're not accepting that. And I really appreciated, that moment where they said, basically, you don't have to explain this to us anymore about what this means. We don't really understand it, but we know who you are, and we stand with you. And that's important, to do, for people as friends and family. I feel like sometimes that's lacking in the world, and we can learn a lot from these parents, just like Guinan said. I appreciated the international representation in this episode. No one went home to the United States or North America. I think Riker and Troy talked about going to Venezuela. We see Worf's parents, they're from Russia. And Picard goes to France, or, England, as some people call it. And for those who can't see it, we're talking about the English-French dynamic in our little chat here. But I have a lot more to say about this episode. I appreciated a lot about the Picard part of the story too, and I can go more into that. But I'll mention here that I appreciate the relationship that he has with Renee right from the beginning, when he's walking down the road, and they begin to kind of joke around with the uncle nephew dynamic, and they continue that joke throughout the episode to the end. So I really appreciated that kind of lightheartedness that he has with his nephew, because again, we've been told that this Picard guy can't really deal with children. That just simply is not true, and we see it again here. So I'll leave it there, and I'll say more later.
Excellent stuff. TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri. You can find him on Star Trek The Cruise just about every year, I bet. Faith Howell is here on the bridge of the Enterprise D. What's up, Faith? What do you think of this one?
Overall, I will say I like this episode, but I do go back and forth, simply because, without spoiling things that come in the future, kind of make this a bittersweet one. But I do really enjoy anytime we get to see, outside of the ship, we get to expand the universe. And this does so much of that at one time. We get Worf's family, and we get more about Crusher's, previous life, and of course Picard. Sorry, my own family is jumping in here. So I do really enjoy this one, and I have always loved the dynamic with Robert and Jean-Luc. That reminds me so much of my sister and I, and we definitely have that sort of love-hate relationship. But I would definitely, if anything happens, if she needs anything, I'm there for her. So definitely there's that. So all right, I'm going to leave it there.
Perfect title for this episode, Family. Thanks very much, Faith Howell. Jake Barrett is here, finally. It's good to see you again, man. What do you think of this one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I don't have much to say, really. I mean, it's nice to get a break after Best of Both Worlds and have Trek not really want to hit that reset button so quick. But like what Faith said, knowing what happens later in Generations, it's really hard for me to watch this episode and not see them really as the same story. And it just reminds me to try to have those conversations before you can't anymore.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thanks.
Short and sweet. Still figuring out the free for all here.
Great shirt, though, by the way.
Great.
You took us all by surprise. We're like, oh, that's good stuff.
The gentleman knows his time.
Thank you very much, Jake Barrett. Where are you, by the way?
I'm in Sarasota, Florida right now, but I got my...
It looks like the moon.
Perfect. Yeah. Sarasota, a.k.a. on the moon. Thanks very much for that. Carrie Schwent, hanging out in a car. What do you think of this one?
I love this episode. It's definitely in my top 10 of the entire series, and it makes me sad that Gene fought so hard against it, because it is just such a great episode. I call it it's a deep breath after how tense Best of Both Worlds was. There are so many sweet moments. Like TJ was saying, the whole nephew uncle thing with Renee just makes me smile every time, because it is just so damn adorable. You've got worse parents, and the whole conversation about prune juice with Gyno, which I thought was so sweet. And when Picard is packing up, Troy gives him a little smooch on the cheek, which I thought was super adorable. Which she kind of owed him, frankly, after all the interrogating. The whole what do you think? I thought, put a nice little sort of Band-Aid on that. I'm blowing through a bunch of things because I won't be here for things left unsaid. But the subplot with Worf's parents is my favorite. I love his parents so much. Worf's mom reminds me of my husband's grandmother, Anna, who after decades of living in the States still had her Polish accent. She was just one of the sweetest human beings. Everything she said with her accent was just alternately more adorable or more funny, depending on what she was saying. And with Worf's reaction when Riker tells him that his parents are on the visitor list, that sort of look of hint of panic for half a second on his face, Eric and I absolutely 100% relate to that, because that's the expression we get on our face whenever his dad calls from Florida. Because while we love him, he's a lot, and any conversation with him, you need to make sure you've got at least a half an hour to sit on the phone and listen to him ramble. Yeah, he's sweet, but he's a lot. And a couple of random things that I found that I thought were kind of adorable. This is the only episode in the entire series that Brett Spiner is not in. It's one of only 4 that you never see the Enterprise bridge at all. I thought that was kind of neat. And the actors that play Worf's dad and Picard's sister-in-law were in an episode of Columbo together, playing a husband and wife, in an episode from 1977 called The Bye Bye Sky High IQ Murder Case. That episode title is a mouthful. And something that I found in the trivia on IMDb, and once I looked at it, I could see it. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but when Picard and Robert are talking after they're done, like facially fighting, the parts of his face that are not covered in mud, Picard's face or Jean-Luc's face, the parts that are not covered in mud, that are clear, you can see his skin, is approximately where all the board headgear was on his face. And when I watched it the second time, I could see it. So I don't know if it was intentional or not, but if it wasn't, well done for the coincidence fairy. But to finish off, I have my limerick for the episode, sort of musing on the whole, kind of family in general. All right, there we go. Get my notebook in the right place here. Family comes in many different forms. They help us weather all kinds of storms. Some we're born into, others not. Each set gives us quite a lot. There is no right group that counts as the norm. And I count all of you guys as part of my extended family.
Nice. And you, Carrie. Thank you very much, Carrie Schwent. Enjoy the concert today. The Dark Lord, Chris McGee, is here wearing a cool Cisco family shirt. What'd you think of this one?
I'm surprised I'm the only one here to wear this shirt today. Well, I, of course, like how this is a direct follow-up to the last episode, almost as though Next Generation were kind of dipping its proverbial toes into serialized storytelling. As TJ mentioned, Worf's discommendation is even brought up, another bit of continuity that I also appreciated. I completely agree with Melissa. The emotional processing that Picard had to go through in this episode was so very necessary, and is the kind that I think many people with seeing some sort of repressed feelings need to experience as well. Hopefully they don't need to fight a family member to do so, though. But as Robert observed, Picard's fight with him was also necessary to help him bury the hatchet, and his recent experience with the Borg paradoxically helped him to do so. Incidentally, I hadn't seen this episode until after I saw the events that Faith alluded to. So without spoiling anything, I'll just say that it definitely shed some light on it for me. For the memorable quote, TJ kind of mentioned it already. I have all the specs and diagrams at home, so I'll go to my second most memorable quote of the episode, which is, "I always thought you needed a little humiliation, or was it humility? Either would do."
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Chris McGee. Excellent stuff. The Matt Boardman is also here. He's always got excellent stuff himself. What do you think of this one?
Well, I love going last because I love that, hearing all of your viewpoints, and then you guys say half the things or 3/4 of the things that I was going to say anyway, and so then I can focus on other things. I love when Star Trek relates to us, and we see things in it that maybe reflect something we may have experienced in our own life. And what I love about this episode is, yeah, it's a step back from all the action. It's a step back from the sci-fi, but every one of us has family, and whatever shape or form that family takes. We have 3 separate stories in this one that maybe you can see some commonality in your own life with those, whether it's, Picard, who's gone through some sort of trauma in his life, and he's going back to his origins, so to speak, to a safe place where he can reset. Whether it's you've been a foster parent, or you've an adoptive parent, or you're a parent as a whole, or all of us have parents, and sometimes as we grow up, we don't always appreciate our parents until later in life. Like Mai said, I think a lot of us, until we have kids of our own, don't truly understand what our parents went through. I know I certainly didn't, and I'm like, man, my parents were saints after dealing with me. And then maybe there are some of those who lost a parent early on in life, or who didn't have a parent that they didn't know very well, and now are having an opportunity to get to know that parent, which is what we saw in Wesley. I know when my son was young, I recorded videos for him for when he was later on in his life, so that he could watch and see what I was going through as a parent, and my feelings and stuff like that when he was younger, and letting him know what a pain in the arse he was. No, I'm just kidding. I absolutely love my son. He's great. But no, I love this kind of episode, and as it was pointed out, we get more of this kind of storytelling in Deep Space Nine, which is why I love Deep Space Nine so much, because It's, there are those moments that are relatable, and episodes like these have heart. Are they perfect? No. I mean, what episode is? But there's so much, there's such a rich tapestry of things available in this episode that is so unlike anything that we've seen to date.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. The Matt Boardman, who, by the way, is wearing a cool shirt made by Melissa Longo. So is Greg Kenzo out there. You can get that at Walking Art made by Melissa. It looks like Mai's wearing a cool shirt, Chat Pack shirt from the 7th Rule. Yep. Great stuff. Thanks, guys. Jake's final take. And so's Faith.
Yeah.
Very cool. Any final thoughts on this episode, Srock?
I think everybody covered a lot of the stuff that we were talking about. Really great points that you made. When I go into the Hollow Suite and load computer program Crusher 1, it's a totally different program. So that's a personal thing. That's a personal thing. I love the moment when Jack Crusher was talking to Wesley, and he says something like, I can't explain to you why I love Starfleet so much. And there was that moment where he kind of looks down and he realizes that he's like his dad, with his love for Starfleet. I thought that was like a small moment, but it was touchy for me, for Wesley to, kind of be walking in his dad's footsteps type of thing. I thought that was special. Also, I heard a shout out to hydroponics. So, I don't know what Ron Morris was doing back in the 90s, but some hydroponics was on his mind. So I did spot that. I tell you what, I really like the emotions that Picard had to deal with. Again, I'm going to reiterate, I would have liked more of it. I think I'm with Eve on that. I think it could have been drawn out a little bit more, because we had just come off of such a riveting episode, and there's so much to kind of draw back from. We don't even, what's the casualties that were involved with that experience. It's a lot of stuff to unpack. It's like a 9/11 type of experience that you can't just get over that quickly, in my opinion. It would take a while. And last we saw him, he had the bandages on his face. So I was expecting to see some still residual effects of that, or maybe even, like I said, a bandage removal kind of ceremony would have been nice. And then lastly, I want to say, just for my own personal preference, I actually would have preferred not so much mud on Picard's face during the climax scene. It took away from his performance to me. I couldn't see his facial expressions. I couldn't see him tearing up as much. His cry looked like almost a smile because of the way the mud was. It was like, it just didn't accentuate his performance to me. Maybe if it was wetter and it was kind of dripping me or something, I just didn't like it being there. It took away from the facial expressions, so I couldn't read his emotions as well as I wanted to. And to me, for that climax scene, it would have been great to have a close up on him with him giving us that full performance. Yeah, the rest I'll leave for things left unsaid. But one of the things that I think was revealed in this episode as well is how the standards that Picard sets for himself, and how he doesn't want to feel inadequate by not achieving those standards. And I think that's what was bothering him about not being able to resist the Borg and not being able to fight what he had to go through with that. He feels inadequate in some ways, and we know that he carries these high standards for himself. So I think that was well expressed in the dialogue. But yeah, ultimately, a lot of stuff going on. And lastly, I will also say, Matt, I don't know if you noticed this, but graphics wise, that the McKinley station that was docked where the ship was docked at, graphically, from visually, didn't look much bigger than the ship itself. And I thought that was weird. That, I mean, we expect like a space station to be larger than the ship itself. The station almost barely fit over the hull of the Enterprise, and I thought that's kind of weird. So that was another kind of, I don't know if that was the original graphic used or the remade graphic, but it didn't sit right with me that the station was like so tiny. So those are my final thoughts.
Excellent. Yeah, when you were describing that, it was kind of like I was picturing kind of a hand in a baseball. I thought the same thing. It was like that ship is almost too big for the station, but that's because you're spoiled with Deep Space Nine. All right. That's it for us, everybody. We want to give a thank you to Chris, Matt, Carrie, Jake, Faith, TJ. When I said Jake, I looked at Sirach too, by the way. Mai, Eve, Allison, Greg, Jason, Melissa, for myself, Sirach Lofton, Melissa Longo, Aaron Eisenberg. Would like to thank you very much for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.